Well, good morning, everyone. We're delighted to be with you today, and I couldn't be more thrilled to have Liz and Jen here to talk about the experiences that they're going through at Netflix and Salesforce. So let's get underway.
Do it.
Liz, I'd love to have you introduce yourself, like what's your current role and what's your background in the industry?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Liz Wamai. I lead our talent acquisition function at Netflix. I've been at Netflix now just over 15 months. Prior to Netflix, I led a couple of recruiting functions at Meta, formerly Facebook. Was there for about 6 years. Prior to that, led talent acquisition at Bloomberg, and was in investment banking before that.
And Jen.
Yeah, hello everyone. Jen Galbraith. I lead internal careers and talent marketplace at Salesforce. I've been at Salesforce for just about 5 years. Time flies when you're having fun. But I was actually hired, and my background is actually digital transformation. So this is a little bit of a sidestep for me, and there's a big digital component to the work we're doing. But I think the transformation is actually more probably why our former CPO asked me to take the role.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to know you both a little bit on a personal level. Let's do a quick lightning round. So, what's your favorite Netflix show, and what's next in your queue?
Oh, man. So for me, my favorite is between Breaking Bad and House of Cards. And Breaking Bad partly because the character development just got me. Every single time. I think I've watched it like 3 times. And then House of Cards, the same thing. And then what's next? By the way, I sat and binged through Baby Reindeer. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's a bit dark.
So dark.
So dark. And then this weekend, I'm planning on watching Man in Full. I can't wait to see that.
I just wish I had more time to watch Netflix, but I would say you reminded me of Breaking Bad. It's been a while, but that's a good one. I really like Lincoln Lawyer. And then I just added The Resident to my list because I'm a sucker for medical dramas.
Well, what's great is AI serving up reminders of what we might like or new opportunities for us to watch.
We actually may or may not, and I'm not just saying this because I have a Netflix reader next to me. We have actually used Netflix as an analogy for what we want our marketplace experience to be like.
Look at that connectivity.
I know.
All right, so Jen, karaoke or walk-up music in your life?
I was telling you, so we're a big softball family. My daughter plays pretty competitive softball, so we're all about the walk-up song, and mine is Coming In Hot.
Coming In Hot.
I'm late to everything.
So much going on.
Yes.
How about you, Liz?
I don't know that I can say the title of mine, but it's by DMX.
Oh, I like it.
We'll leave it at that.
All right. All right, favorite place to like return time after time?
Yeah.
And or, what's next on your explore list?
Yes. So I'm originally from Kenya, and so I love to go back to Kenya, to parts of Africa. I love it. I can't get enough of it. But I also fell in love with Southeast Asia, so I try to get back there as often as I can. I've canceled a trip twice to Bhutan, which is on top of my list, so I'm hoping to get there sometime soon.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, Liz and I share a connection. I grew up in Kenya, so I love chatting with her about that. How about you, Jen?
I would say Cabo is like our go-to because I live in Austin and you can get there pretty quickly nowadays, and so we go a few times a year. But Greece is on my list, and I'm hoping to get there in the next few years.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Well, it's been great to learn a little bit more about you and share with the audience. Let's switch to your organizations. You're both from category-defining organizations. Tell us a little bit about your culture, what makes it unique, and how does that relate to what we're talking about in terms of talent intelligence?
I would say Netflix, and I missed George's presentation. I heard he gave Netflix a shout-out. So I will talk a little bit about the culture, which is fairly unique. We have a culture memo that I know folks can find on the website, but as somebody who's been there 15 months and been at different companies, it's really real and palpable. And there's really 4 core principles with Netflix culture. One is the dream team, is that we aim to hire high-performing individuals, people who have high expectations of themselves, achievers. That tends to be the number one thing is how do you hire and build a dream team? So that's one. And then the second is about people over process, is a big principle and a big aspect of our culture, which is when I joined, people would say the P word, which is we don't like process, too much process. What is good process. And so for somebody who's in TA, and I love a good process, I found it really hard not to say the P word. But people over process really is about treat people like adults, give them what, set the direction, the goals, and then expect them to do the best work. And so people over process is something that we tend to anchor to a lot. The second piece is we are about entertaining the world. And with entertaining the world is holding the bar high in terms of how do we thrill our audiences and how do we thrill our members. So that also entails that something is going to be uncomfortable, but we want to make it exciting. And so even though it's uncomfortable, lean into it. So lean into the discomfort is a third aspect of our culture. And then finally, it's around getting better and constantly going for the big bets. I think most of you saw the NFL announcement on Christmas Day. Pursuing live is a big one, ads is a big one, games is a big one. So it's really about leaning into the discomfort and constantly seeking what's best. So we have something we say at Netflix, which is Netflix sucks right now compared to what we'll be doing tomorrow. And so it's constantly something that we strive for.
So all of those, when you think about the people that then
Yes.
need to help bring that to life, are so critical. And I know we'll be talking about some of those themes today.
Yep.
Jen, Salesforce also has unique culture.
Very unique. And I would say at the core of our culture is our customer success. But a lot of how we think about our employees is how does everybody in the organization, whether they're actually customer facing or not, focused on customer success. And I think we try to then within our HR function think about, and we're actually called employee success for that reason. I go back and forth because sometimes if I say employee success, people are like, what are you talking about? That's what we call HR. And so I think the customer success is at the core, but trust and innovation are very much wrapped around that. I would say some of the things that are not necessarily, the written down parts of our culture, we have a real bias for action. And so we're not going to sit around and think for a long time. Whether right or wrong, one of the things we say at Salesforce is tactics dictate strategy. And so sometimes we're just going to go experiment and run at it and focus on how are we going to solve this problem, maybe sometimes before the problem is even fully understood. And so the bias for action can be really great. It can also be a deterrent sometimes. And then we're a very relationship-driven company. Even as Salesforce, in my 5 years, it's more than doubled in size. We are very much about relationships, which again is a double-edged sword. It's great because we thrive on it, and when you're trying to roll out something like a more, equality-driven talent, it can't be about who you know. So we're in that journey where we're thinking about our culture and maybe what do we actually have to break down.
Yeah. So really big implications of thinking about what's worked well with our culture, and then how can we work together with our organization, our partners, to help envision the future. And I know one of the things, obviously, when we think about talent intelligence and the way we can bring that to life, I like to use this paradigm, putting skills at the center of the employee vision, because it's really about changing the experience from the very beginning that we have engagement in the market, right? So when we're connecting with individuals in the market, they know your brands, right? So that means something, but how do we translate that into connectivity and making sure we were able to build the kind of talent pools? And once we invest in that, what's been, historically we might have a lot of interests, but being able to mine that information effectively now is the key. So this just shows how we can think about that journey, how Eightfold can be infused from a talent intelligence perspective, leveraging the insights of AI, and from a skills perspective, really transform that across all the personas, but certainly candidate experiences we heard about earlier today, in Sachit's vision. A big part of that, helping individuals understand their skills and how they connect in with the organization to incent them to apply to the right positions. And then translating that, really, there's so much excitement that happens during talent acquisition, but how do we keep that momentum up once an individual's within our organization and carry that journey through by serving up all types of opportunities, whether those are learning opportunities or engagement in gig work or just connecting with mentors. And I know that's been an interesting part of both your journeys. So let's kind of talk about that next. So when we think about the growth that you've had and these emerging trends that we've been talking about, can you share a little bit, Jen, about your initiative, how that's come to together and what it is that you're focused on.
Yeah, so when Brent asked me to take this, Brent, our former chief people officer, when he asked me to take this role on about a year and a half ago, we had been dabbling with this concept of a talent marketplace, but I would be honest with you, it was very much kind of what Burson was saying not to do earlier. We were very enamored by the solution. I don't know that we knew what problem we were trying to solve. But really, when I leaned in, we were listening to our employees. They were saying it was easier to get a job outside than it was inside, that we tended to over-rotate on external talent versus internal talent. And then I think what kind of crashed into that was, whether opportunistic or not, was that, earlier last year, the market took a turn and a lot of the tech companies, hit some restructuring obstacles, and our growth changed, right? So we weren't going to be on this massive rocket ship of growth. We were going to be doing more targeted growth. We're still growing as an organization, but it wasn't going to be this rocket ship. And so we weren't going to be needing to hire as many folks. And what Burson was saying earlier really resonated about, like, those big companies aren't going to be the successful ones. And so we actually had to start to say, well, our employees have been saying that it's hard to find a job and it's painful. And we have to give them something else, because part of what success or careers looked like at Salesforce for many years was you've been in your role for 12 months and you're doing a good job, so you get promoted. Oh, you've been in your role for 18 months, you get promoted. And that was what careers were, but that wasn't going to be sustainable. And so we had to really take a step back and say, okay, we have to redefine careers. And that's really the journey we've been on, is saying, what does it mean to have a career at Salesforce? It's not about the constant promotions. It's about, what does the business need? What are your interests and your opportunities? Are you performing? I feel like I keep quoting everybody, but what Mandel said yesterday about, mobility is not a birthright, it's for high performers. It's a big part of it. My talent management partner is in the audience, and I hope she's like smiling that I'm shouting that out, but you have to be performing. And so we're really trying to bring all of that together and then enable that with technology.
Yeah, I liked what you said, that the human outcomes and the business outcomes. We heard a little bit from Simona and the trends that she talked about, and how focusing on both of those together, which is different than what we've done in the past, but both of those together really accelerates that ultimate goal of human performance.
Yeah, and I think when we were on this, crazy rocket ship of growth, we were promoting and we were just creating jobs. It wasn't like we weren't looking and being like, does the business need this role at a senior VP? Who knows? But we're going to make you a senior VP, or we're going to make you a senior manager. And so we had to really do a little bit of a reset. And I think that can be jolting for employees who are used to a certain way of, like, even when I got hired, I remember when my first one-on-ones with one of my employees, her introduction to me was like, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I need to be promoted because I've been in my role. And I was like, I don't even know your last name. Like, how am I going to promote you? And so that was like the first thing. And so us really starting to break that down. And we haven't finished. We are by no means finished. But that's the work we're actively doing, is starting to say, like, there has to be a business need. It has to align with your needs. And then getting honest and saying, hey, maybe we can't serve you here, but we're going to give you all the skills and experiences that will make you employable somewhere else. And then maybe you can boomerang back. We love boomerangs at Salesforce.
Human sustainability right there.
Yeah.
Liz, you've had a lot of transformation going on at Netflix in the talent arena. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, right in the thick of it. And I'm looking at the team from Netflix here, because we are right in the thick of change management. To eightfold, we did, I think in the fall, implement Talent Marketplace, but very much resonate with what Jen is sharing about the journey, is where you've come from this rocket ship. And prior to 2022, you've been hiring. If you have a need, you've got headcount, you go to your TA team and you do a ton of the hiring. 2022 happened, and different landscape. And so how do you reskill people? How do you look at people internally? But I hear a lot of times, I've been at Netflix 15 months, I can't tell you how many times people will say, we used to be a TA-led HR function, because a lot of it was about going out and buying talent. Whereas now it's about, how do we build that talent? How do we identify that talent internally? When I look at just the sheer number of positions filled at Netflix, about 20% of those are being filled by internal employees. Where I've seen at other companies, you'll hear some companies say 50-50 is the mix. And so we want to get to a good balance of, when we have that talent internally, how do we make it easy for them to be able to find opportunities? So we have three main pillars for our talent function. One is architecting the org, which is about the infrastructure. And then the second is about nurturing the culture, which I touched on. And then the third one is about enabling growth. and it's enabling growth for employees. So starting with what our strategy and our pillars are, then coming to how do you solve for that with the technology that we have. And what we realized is enabling talent growth is part of talent acquisition and talent management. And so how do we find a solution that is both applicable to the talent management side, talent marketplace, and also on the talent acquisition side of the house? So those were some of the things that we were focused on, was finding a solution that was going to be fluid. UI, the user experience, we have some very vocal engineers, so we want to make sure that that experience is also very seamless for them. But it was really around how do we enable that and nurture that growth. So we've got a huge initiative around Netflix now, which is about growth at, which is about how do you make it easy for people to find opportunities. If it's easier for them to find an opportunity externally, then we've got a problem. And that was what we thought was the problem is people were joining Netflix. The number 3 reason they were joining was because of career growth. But if it's the number 1 reason why they're leaving, then we're doing something off, especially if those opportunities are available, but we're not making it easy for them to find. So we went through that assessment of what is the best platform, what was the best space for us to be able to open up connections, open up mentorship opportunities, be able to advertise our own, and landed at Eightfold.
And so, Liz, you mentioned that you rolled out the pilot of Talent Marketplace.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so there's been some positive feedback coming out of that. Mm-hmm. What is that? And then what's next as you think about how to roll that out more broadly? Because I think you have an interesting approach of going from the pilot and then what your ultimate end goal is.
Absolutely. So rolled it out in fall of last year, Talent Marketplace, and we identified 4 functions, also using user design. We identified 4 functions that we thought, one, business sponsorship, wanted to make sure that the leadership team as well as the employees for those functions are open to the opportunities and the change. We also thought about the way you want to start the pilot is one, you've got the appetite, there's a need. From a design standpoint, it was not going to be that difficult to embed those 4 functions. And then what we've done over the last couple of months is assessing what the feedback is that's coming through. We've had really good, fairly good adoption. I'm looking at Vicky because she's been running the pilot. We've had fairly good adoption. I think about 66% of the folks from those functions have created profiles. 68% are coming back and signing on after the initial login. We've got projects posted on. We've got mentorship opportunities, roles that folks are applying for. I feel good about open roles is what people, as a recruiter, tend to use it for mostly. But overall, we've seen that there's been quite an appetite across the 4 functions. And then the plan then is, initially we were going to go with an enterprise-wide launch. But what we thought, and tends to be part of the Netflix culture, is a little bit of freedom and responsibility, is we decided it would be best for the functions to opt in. And so we have functions that are opting in either for mentorship opportunities, ERG opportunities, where some ERGs are advocating to sign on. So for the rest of this year, 2024, it will be functions that are opting in based on the opportunities that they see on the platform. And then 2025 is when we intend to go with the enterprise-wide launch, which, by the way, also allows us from a TA standpoint, because we're just about to go live with Eightfold, it allows us then to be able to assess and begin to just get that happening much more organically. So there was the pilot with the 4 opt-in for functions this year, and then 2025 Jan is when we go with an enterprise-wide launch.
And so then ultimately, your talent organization will be able to see the full ecosystem, those prospects, people who've applied, the internal, and make, assessment and use the AI to understand the talent pools in a really different way.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm. So Jen, you talked a little bit about the fact that you've had the pilot going on. Mm-hmm. How did you pick the cohort that you started with? What was meaningful about that?
Well, it was a little bit, and I'm dating myself, but I feel like when I was a lot younger and there was a line outside the club and everyone wanted to get in, there's demand. We're kind of having to turn people away because everyone wants to be part of this. But we very intentionally picked a group in our India location, partially because India is a high growth area for us, and that's where there's a lot of career activity, opportunity. But also we did we looked at a lot of the data, and we identified a group in our technical customer support organization that had very high attrition and very low internal mobility. So they were trapped talent. They had very good technical skills, but they weren't given a shot internally. In fact, some of them were even leaving the company and finding that when they were external, they were giving shots, but not when they were internal. I can't make this stuff up. And so we picked that group for that reason. And I think another big part of our recipe for success is the leadership was very, very interested in sponsoring it. So that leadership was very open-minded to like, hey, we want to give these employees a shot. We want them to see this as a stepping stone for other careers at Salesforce. And so that sponsorship played a big part in it as well.
There was a really moving story that was shared last night over dinner about an individual from that group.
It was actually from our current pilot. So we were doing a second pilot in India that kicked off a few weeks ago. And one of the leaders on my team was on the ground in India for the kickoff. And a woman, they'd done a big kickoff session just to get folks hyped. And a woman came up to him after, and she was in tears. And she shared with Joe, one of my leaders, that she's a single mother, and that she's trying to figure out how to support her family, and that for the first time she felt hope that she would actually be able to like grow her career and potentially really start to gain new skills and have more opportunity. And so I even just get the kind of goosebumps thinking about
Absolutely.
it. But it's like, well, and I just think, you can get caught up in the grind of the day-to-day where, or I sometimes have to remind myself, like, we're not doctors, we're not saving lives, because you can get so caught up. And the work we're doing makes a difference, and it matters.
I have those same shivers. And, we talked about the concept of human sustainability, and it really is that broader impact that we're making. So we started talking about culture and the cultures of your organization, but we think more broadly how we're helping transform lives. That's just a beautiful example of that. And it kind of serves to prove your hypothesis, Jen, of why you selected that cohort to begin with.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah. And I just think, even to some of the other verbatims we've gotten, about people who's like, I've been at Salesforce for 2.5 years, and it's the first time I actually felt like I have an idea of what I can do next. And I think, that you start to think about that down at the individual level, and it can be really powerful.
Oh, that's great. Well, Liz, I want to talk a little bit about the early time to adoption for talent acquisition. And it's kind of a different persona lens, right? Kind of changing the ability for your sourcers and your coordinators and your team to have tools that would kind of transform the way they were doing their work. So when we first started talking about this initiative that Netflix was undertaking, this broad talent acquisition and talent management transformation, one of the powerful, I think, goals that your organization had was, how do we start getting value out of our investment with Eightfold while we're on this journey? Because you had also selected to implement Workday recruiting along with Eightfold talent acquisition, and that would take, for a global organization through the design phase and the implementation about a year with alignment with some other initiatives. So Liz, you had some ideas about early adoption, which I think then was translated into early change champions as well. But what were some of the decisions around that, and then what are the outcomes?
Yeah. So definitely use user design and design principles. So looking at the different personas. I think right now we have about 11 to 12 personas that we're thinking about taking on this change journey. So when you think about your hiring managers, you think about your coordinators, think about interviewers, employees, so really spelling out who are the folks who are going to be interacting and what is their experience from the very beginning, and wanted to make sure that they had a really good experience. But first and foremost, TA. Because TA then becomes the first point of call for hiring managers, coordinators, so wanted to make sure that the TA experience was good. Prior to my joining, by the way, this all predates me, so I'd like to take credit, but I cannot. This all predates me with the selection of Eightfold. But the experience, I remember joining, and there was this user journey that one of our program managers had spelled out, and it was using emojis about the experience of TA throughout the applicant tracking system in the process. And it was hilarious, but it resonated with me. And there was so many scowly faces, or faces with scowls, when they would went through the pleasure. I think the most exciting part was the intake with the hiring managers. Then once they got into the system, it was just downhill from there. And then when it got to offer, it was like, I'm out of the system. So it was really powerful to be able to see that and to have the recruiters and the sources see that and say, this completely resonates. Also, about 69% of our workflow was outside the ATS. We had about 10 tools plus that recruiters were using in addition to Google Sheets. So overall, a very clunky experience that hadn't really kept up with the pace of growth. So it was really important, one, to get change champions, or folks that we were going to have early adopters in the program. So we had recruiters, sources involved in the process, working with the team, giving their feedback about it. I got a note from one of the early adopter sources the other day who said to me, just seeing my feedback I was getting heard, and that feedback was being incorporated as part of the early adoption, early time to value, I think was really helpful. Those are the same folks we're going to be using for the change management. So we're just now going through, literally in the thick of it, going through the training content for TA, and what that training content is going to look like. We're going through the change process as well for our hiring managers. Everybody, all the way from our CFO, CHRO, Sergio, we have a meeting with them tomorrow to talk about, we want to make sure that the experience for hiring managers is really seamless, so trying to compress the amount of training that they'll be getting. And those were things we talked about as part of change. At the very beginning, we talked about what is the change readiness, the change impact. I don't know that there's many organizations that do change very well. We're guilty. And so how do we make sure that that process is seamless as we go live in July?
And I think that investment early and then throughout the journey was so critical, right? So we had individuals who were representing and helping assess, the change throughout this process, from the very beginning of the persona-led design all the way through all the testing cycles. And I think, that commitment's been really important in how it will carry through. The other thing about this part of the program was really leveraging data that existed today. So moving off of a talent acquisition system that you had invested in but had outgrown. So how could we harness that data and really use the concepts that of AI and talent rediscovery? And so that was, I think, a great business value as well as the human experience outcomes they're going through, actually being able to accelerate the identification of talent in a new way. So great things that were put in there. So when we think about getting closer to launch, obviously you've talked about the change journey for this. Is there anything else that you would share with the audience that you think would be helpful for them to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think I underestimated, when you think about that change, when you think about what is the content that will be most relevant for TA, for our hiring managers, people managers, because we're going through a much broader change, as you're aware. When you think about the timeline for that change, when you think about when our hiring cycles are happening, we have folks going on campus pretty much when we're going to be going live or when we're starting our grad hiring. So I do think thinking through the timeline, thinking through the change for each persona, getting, like I mentioned earlier, TA much ready earlier. The other thing we've taken into account is how do people learn and how do people process change? So for us we're going through a couple of things. One, we're going through the very self modules where people can do the modules, the self-training themselves, and then we're going to have live sessions a few days just before the go live, where we're going to have all of TA in all the different locations in person, and that's where we're going to have train the trainer concept, and we're going to have a couple of the folks from our operations team really spending time with them to get familiar and comfortable with the tool. And then once it goes live and we have a hiring manager, TA then becomes the super user. We have invested a lot of time in thinking through how do we get the early adopters then becoming the super users so that our hiring managers are not trying to get hold of the TA ops team. In fact, they're going straight to the TA person because that's who they typically would be going to. HRBPs, how do we make sure that our HRBP partners are also very much aware of the change? So I've been part of a couple of road shows with our HRBP teams. We have a forum where we do demos for them. I'll tell you how intuitive it is. I went through one session with the team. I've been doing demos at some of the senior meetings.
Because it's that intuitive, right? Yeah.
Be scared, be very scared. But I think it just speaks to the fact that you have TA and you have TA representing, and we have our HRBP partners. So I would say is thinking through all the different personas, what's the best way to get them to adopt it and feel comfortable with the change. Also, we have hiring managers who don't even want to engage with our current ATS and our TA tech stack. They don't. They find it clunky. And so engaging them, so the naysayers, engaging them as early as possible through UAT as well as through the demos. So we're just checking all of this as we go.
Hey, Jen, I want to wrap up with something that occurred to me it was a discussion that was held earlier in the conference about data and whether or not you should really make sure that all your data your job architecture's been done, your skills have been mapped, and all of that to start. I think you had a bit of a different approach in
We-
terms of how you accelerated your journey.
We did. I think it might go back to that tactics dictate strategy. We didn't wait. We ran at it. And so we had a hypothesis that the AI would actually help us figure out what our job architecture and skills look like, and it has. We were just talking about this at dinner last night. We went live with the pilot. My team is here who's been helping run the pilot, and we were doing some retro on the hiring results from the folks we placed and what their match scores were. And it worked, and we didn't do any calibration. We didn't do any architecture. We literally just loaded our Workday data. And so that's out of the box. And yeah, we want to get there. We want to like think about what our top jobs are and do some of that calibration. But we have learned so much just by going out and doing this pilot and getting started. And I think that would be my advice: is don't obviously think about it, but don't belabor it and don't get paralyzed with all the details. You just got to run at it because the employees want this, and I think they'll help you figure it out.
Well, I think that's a great way to end. It's like keep that digital playground mindset as you embark or continue on your own journeys. It's just been a pleasure to continue to work with both of you and your organizations, and good luck for the next part of the journey.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.